Ch21, Neverseen. What do you mean by 3? Fitz asked the collective. There are 5 of us, 6 if you include my mom. I'm aware, Mr. Forkel said, but I only need Miss Foster and Miss Sensen for this. But I'm Sophie's cognate, Fitz argued. Cognate in training, Mr. Forkel corrected. Besides, Miss Foster will only use her abilities if I decide it's safe, and Mr. Sensen is only going to be the ruse. He turned to Kif. You're confident you can mimic your mother's voice? You have no idea how many detentions I've talked my way out of. Mr. Forkel didn't find that as reassuring as Kif intended, but all he said was, be ready at sunrise. He met them in the Bridges gazebo the next morning, wearing a long black cloak with the Neverseen symbol on the sleeve. To say the costume triggered panic was an understatement. When everyone was done, screaming and bracing for attack, Mr. Forkel tossed back his hood and gave Sophie and Kif matching cloaks. Sophie's hands shook as she slipped on her costume, and she couldn't take her eyes off the sleeve, remembering all the times the same white eye had taunted her dreams. Kif looked just as pale, but his jaw was set with determination. Be safe, Della whispered, pulling them both close for a hug. You're sure you don't want to come? Fitz tried one more time. Yes, Mr. Backer. But don't worry, you'll have plenty of opportunities to risk your life in the future. The sad part was, Mr. Forkel wasn't really joking. Remember your panic switch if you need me, Dex told Sophie. That is very generous, Mr. Disney, but we're going somewhere you'll be unable to follow unless you have one of these. Mr. Forkel pulled a grayish vial out of his cloak pocket, and Sophie groaned when she recognized the weak glow of Candicia, one of the 5 unmapped stars. Sophie had endured a leap with its light once before. During an exhausting test, the Black Swan put her and Kif through to try and figure out how the Neverseen kept following them. It is not my first choice either, Miss Foster, but there was only one place we could think to move Geddon that the Neverseen could not easily burn. Sophie sighed. Underwater. The leap felt every bit as endless as Sophie remembered, as if time had screeched to a halt, trapping them forever in the empty gray nothing. And yet, somehow, it still seemed too soon when they collapsed in the soggy circle of sand. An invisible force field created a dome of air around them. Was this made by a psionipath? Sophie asked, holding up her balefire pendant to inspect the edges of the force field. One of the best, Mr. Forkel agreed. Where's our kraken body this time? Kif asked, squinting at the empty ocean. The water is too warm here. Last time I sent you to our northern retreat. This is our eastern hold. Sophie shouldn't have been surprised that the Black Swan had more than one underwater hideout, or a psionipath on their team. But it was hard to process how truly huge the organization was turning out to be. Am I the only one who doesn't see a prison? Kif asked, pacing the length of the bubble. Mr. Forkel stomped his feet. The prison is beneath us. He removed the parcel from his cloak pocket, releasing a plume of stink as he enwrapped a blob of solidified black slime. What's that? Sophie asked, plugging her nose to block the starchy smell. Congealed silky skin, Mr. Forkel said. I've just signaled the dwarves below to take out the slice I sent them. A Trejan will soon find the smell irresistible and create our tunnel. Sophie had no idea what a Trejan was, but she had a feeling it was better not to ask. Instead, she said, Does that mean the dwarves are working with us again? A handful of them, yes, and they are incredibly generous to do so considering Yeager passed away yesterday. Sophie's heart felt like it had been dunked in ice water. He was a dwarf injured on Everest, wasn't he? Mr. Forkel nodded. The fury made Sophie shake, or she thought that was the reason, until she realized the ground was shaking as well. Seconds later, she noticed a giant bump racing toward him, but when she flinched back, Mr. Forkel told her, remain still and make no sound. He tossed the silky skin to the center of their small space, just as a huge iridescent claw popped out of the sand. A second claw followed, along with way too many screaming legs and antennae and some sort of giant glowing opalescent shell. The tragedy gobbled up the silky skin and burrowed back into the sand, leaving a gaping tunnel. Our path awaits, Mr. Forkle said. Isn't that thing still down there? Sophie whispered. Probably, but it's perfectly harmless. It didn't look harmless. In fact, Sophie was pretty sure those claws would feature prominently in her nightmares. Still, she followed Mr. Forkle into the tunnel. Every shift of the sand made her jump, anticipating a Trajan attack. Easy, Foster, Keith told her, offering her his hand. She took it, her shaking. Yeah, giant claws could come popping out of the sand any second. Honestly, have you two never seen a sand crab before? Mr. Forkle asked. Teeny tiny ones I caught in the waves when my parents took me to the beach, Sophie said. Is that what those things look like when they're bigger? She scratched her arms, feeling like the time she'd seen a butterfly under a microscope and deeply regretted ever letting them land on her fingers. Actually, trojans are much prettier, Mr. Forkle promised. The dwarfs esteemed Trajan pass pace above any gem. King Enka's crown is carved from a single piece. That's super gross, Keith said. Mr. Forkle ignored him and they moved in silence until the tunnel brightened with flickering blue light. Is everyone ready? Mr. Forkle asked. Keith lifted up his hood. Bring it on. Their plan was simple. Pretend to break into the chamber and hope Geddon believed he was being rescued. Mr. Forkle had already alerted the guards so they'd know to play along. There it is, Mr. Forkle whispered as a round door came into view. It looked like a giant abalone shell with swirling blotches of blue, green, and silver. Keith moved to the lead. Remember, if at any point you need to abort, cry Swan Song and our guards will get us out, Mr. Forkle told him. I can handle it, Keith promised. Sophie hoped that was true. The warning Mr. Forkle had given Keith a few days earlier kept echoing through her head. One should never rely on their enemies to give them hope. Here goes nothing, Keith whispered, then shouted, Now! And rammed his shoulder against the abalone shell, slamming the door open. The next few minutes were filled with more screams and bangs and crashes than a summer blockbuster movie. The dwarven guards made an excellent show of resisting before collapsing to the ground with defeated groans. Kip shouted orders in his mother's voice and threw open another abalone door, revealing a thick net of dried kelp. Sophie backed away as Mr. Forkle shattered his balefire crystal against the crackly leaves. Blue sparks showered the kindling, filling the cavern with thick, salty smoke. The fire burned hot and fast, and then it was gone. As the smoke cleared, Sophie got her first glimpse of Getten hunched against the wall, bound, gagged, and blindfolded. His black Neverseen cloak was gone, revealing a wrinkled shirt and military-style vest. Yet he still bore the Neverseen symbol on a white-black band tied around his bicep. Getten, wake up! Kif, as Lady Gisela shouted, time to go! Someone untie him! This was the trickiest part, the moment where everything could unravel. Geddon had likely been trained to wait for some sort of code word in case of traps like this, and they were hoping all the excitement would have him thinking about the word. Sophie and Keith needed to amp up the charade while Mr. Forkle plucked the code word from his mind. Keith shouted more commands in his mother's voice, and Sophie set to work, removing Geddon's gag. The fabric was soaked with drool, and Sophie felt her stomach lurch as a slimy moisture coated her fingers. She wiped them on his wrist bonds as she removed those necks, her eyes fixating on the crescent-shaped scar on Geddon's hand. The mark had been a present from the dog Geddon used the first time he tried to kidnap her, and had faded since the last time Sophie saw it. Why did he get to heal, when the hurt he'd caused would never go away? She was so focused on the scar, she hadn't noticed that Keith had come up beside her. So she jumped when she shouted in Lady Gisela's voice, Polaris! Mr. Forkle nodded at Sophie, confirming that was a word he'd found in Geddon's mind. Polaris, Keith repeated. When Geddon didn't steer, he slapped Geddon's face. Didn't you hear me? I said Polaris. Keith went to hit Geddon again, but Sophie grabbed his wrist and pointed to Geddon's hand, where two fingers had begun to twitch. That's right, Kif said in his mother's voice. Wake up, we have to get out of here. Geddon moaned and trashed, knocking off his blindfold. Sophie had about 3 seconds to celebrate their victory. Then Geddon's lips cracked with a smile as his eyes settled on her. Sophie Foster, just who I wanted to see. To Neverseen. You didn't honestly think you could fool me, did you? Geddon asked, laughing as Mr. Forkle scrambled to pull Sophie away from him. Apparently you did. That's hilarious. He tossed his blonde hair out of his face, revealing a black eye from where Sophie had sucker punched him during his capture. His nose also looked swollen and crooked. Sophie hoped it was broken. Her fingers curled into a fist, ready to pummel him again. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, sorry. When he told her, Thank you for untying my hands. I probably should have waited until you'd untied my feet too. There's no way you can escape, Mr. Forkle said, motioning to the fire-scarred doorway. Half a dozen dwarfs stood in a tight line, with melders trained on Geddon's head. Do I look like I'm trying to leave? Geddon asked. I honestly haven't minded my visit here. I do my best thinking when I can talk my consciousness away. I only came back because I couldn't pass up a chance to chat with Miss Foster. Plus, I couldn't take another second of your charade. He turned to Keith. Your mother will laugh when she hears about your performance just now, though clearly some of her preparation has taken hold. Preparation for what? Sophie demanded. Geddon's smile dripped with ice. Can't ruin the surprise. He'll find out soon enough. Yeah, I don't think I will, seeing as how my mom is dead. Sophie was stunned at how calmly Giff delivered the news, almost as stunned as Geddon was to hear it. Another part of the trick? Geddon asked. Giff leaned closer. You tell me. Some gnomes saw her all cut up and bleeding and being dragged into the mountains near the lake of blood. We're assuming the ogres had her killed because she let you get captured. That does sound like something King Dimitar would do, Geddon said quietly. You really think Lady Gisela is... Sophie couldn't say the last word. Geddon stared at the ceiling. How would I know? I've spent the last days locked away in my own mind. I told you I'd been trained for this. He turned to Mr. Forkle. I feel you poking around, by the way. Your telepathy isn't nearly as clever as you think. Hers is, of course. He winked his unbruised eye at Sophie. Too bad she doesn't know how to use it. I know plenty. Sophie snapped. Stop. Mr. Forkle grabbed Sophie by her shoulders. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to read his mind. Do you understand me? Forkle's right. I can feel too much hope coming off him. Keith slammed Geddon into the wall and pinned him by his neck. What were you planning to do to her? Geddon wheezed for breath. Let him go, Mr. Forkle ordered. Keith hesitated before he dropped him. Geddon doubled over, clutching his throat as he hacked and coughed. You'd make this a lot easier on yourself if you just answer our questions, Sophie told him. Tell us what the Neverseen were doing in Brackendale. Brackendale? Geddon asked. Don't play dumb. We found your stupid force field around the tree, Kif snapped. Geddon's brows shut up. That is unexpected. We also met one of your buddies, Sophie added. He thought he was so special with his psionipatrix. He is special, Geddon said. I recruited him myself. But he's not supposed to be taking action yet, Mr. Forkle said. Is he? Geddon's eyes narrowed. Very good. Your pathetic telepathy scraped out one secret. A worthless one you already know most of. Yes, we have many timelines. And yes, it looks like one has changed. All that means is everyone's roles will soon be much clearer. Why are you looking at me? Kif asked, backing up a step. Why do you sound so afraid? Garen countered. Wouldn't it be nice to finally feel useful? Not that you haven't had your moments, but someday you'll be more than just the wannabe rebel. Once you stop trying to impress the Black Swan's little doll. Shut up, Kif shouted. Oh, come on. Haven't you always wanted to hear that someone believes in you? Garen asked. We do. Or rather, your mother convinced us that we should. Maybe we should go, Sophie said when she noticed how hard Kif was shaking. Yes, I think that's a good idea. Mr. Forkle agreed. Not yet, Kif said, stalking closer to Geddon. How long have you known my mother? She joined us not long after she got pregnant with you. Puts things in perspective, doesn't it? All the lies you believed, all the clues you missed. And now she could very well be gone, and you'll never get to know why. Unless I tell you, you're a monster, Sophie growled. Said the living lab experiment. Tell me, did it spark your life and then freeze you and keep tweaking? Of course not. Mr. Forgle turned to Sophie. Any tweaks I made to your DNA were done before your inception. I implanted your embryo immediately. Okay, Sophie said, not sure why you seem so upset by the idea. Humans froze embryos all the time, and either way, she was still an experiment. But for the first time, she didn't care. She stalked closer. If whatever they did to me makes it so I can stop you, it's worth it. You may inconvenience us occasionally, he sneered, but you will never stop us. We'll see about that, Mr. Forkle told him. She's done an excellent job keeping you distracted, and now I've found the information we came for. Looks like the next stage of your timeline will be in Marsh. Geddon's jaw dropped. I can divide my consciousness, Mr. Forkle said with a smile. One part of my mind was being rather obvious while the other slipped past and dug out what I needed. Clever enough for you? It'd be more clever if you had any chance of stopping what's happening. There's always a way, Mr. Forkle said, dusting off his hands. Oh, and we'll also be removing that bludge blot from your nails, so you won't have to worry about your friends tracking you. Geddon snorted. There's no way to remove bludge blot. That's why the ogres use it. Burned like the sun when they painted it on. Well then, I guess we'll just have to remove your nails entirely. Our froster will be by soon to freeze them off, so I'd recommend you go back to the place you've been hiding and hope your pain receptors stop working. Geddon shouted threats as they left, but the warnings were as empty as his sandy cell. His final words to give were the only ones with any impact. You're choosing the wrong side, boy. You'll regret it when you see your mother's vision realized, but then it'll be too late. 23 never seen, sorry. You guys don't look so good, Lex said as Sophie and Keith stumbled back to the girls' main room. What happened? Sophie didn't know where to begin as she collapsed into the nearest chair. Keith flopped onto the ottoman next to her and stared at the ceiling. They'd had to use light from Marquisare to leap home, and the unmapped star's glow felt like getting sliced and diced by a shattered disco ball. But Sophie's unease had much more to do with the fact that Kala and Blur were on their way to Marsh, another neutral territory, to investigate, while Mr. Forkle had left to get scald so she could freeze off Geddon's fingernails. The latter task haunted Sophie more than the first, making the black swan pendant around her neck grow 1,000,000 pounds heavier. She knew that they had to stop the Neverseen from fighting Geddon, but wasn't that they were doing to him torture? Della crouched in front of Sophie and turned Sophie's face from side to side, then squeezed Sophie's cheeks, giving her a fish face. What are you doing? Sophie asked, though it came out more like "Wooing." Attempting to fill in for Elwin. He gave me a Sophie survival kit, as well as a separate list called Crazy Messes that Sophie will find a way to get herself into. Sophie sighed as Della fished a huge collection of crumpled papers from her pocket, each covered in Elwin's messy writing. Here it is, she said, after flipping through several. Light poisoning. Symptoms include fatigue, severe dehydration, bluish tint to the gums, and glints of sparkle in the irises. Poisoning? Sophie repeated. And wait, what about my irises? It means your body reformed with light particles still in it. Not surprising considering you were lipping with unmapped stars. Della handed Sophie a mirror. See what I mean? Great, my eyes look like alicorn poop. Della laughed. It is a strange effect, I'll admit. Even stranger how it makes Keith look like a Vacker. Della was right. The shimmer in Keith's eyes made him look teal for some reason. Always wanted to be part of the family, Keith mumbled. The sadness in his voice broke Sophie's heart. Are you okay? She whispered. Keith shrugged and scooted away from her. You'll both feel better once you take Elwin's remedy. Della opened a huge medicine cabinet, which Sophie had thought was just a big shrubbery, and studied the shelves of small glass vials. There were elixirs, balms, and poultices in every color. Della handed them each a tar-like vial and one that looked a lot like snot. Sophie uncorked the black one and took a whiff. Ah, this smells like egg burp. Here, Della said, giving them each a bottle of youth. Wash it down with this. You need it for the dehydration. You need it for the dehydration. Anyway, the slightly sweet water helped a little, but Sophie could still taste the burpy medicine even after she'd swallowed, and the naughty elixir tasted like a bug smoothie. So are you guys ever going to tell us what happened? Bianna asked, because I think Dex is going to explode if you don't. Hey, don't put it all on me, Lex argued. If Bianna twists her hands any tighter, she's going to pull off one of her fingers. Bianna blushed. I guess you're all a little worried. Sophie turned to Keith. Sophie turned to Keith. Do you want to tell them? He shook his head. You'll do a better job. Sophie doubted that, but she did her best to sum up everything Kitten had said. Every word seemed to make Keith's slouch smaller. You know she was just saying that stuff to get into your head, right? Fitz asked him. Well, mission accomplished. Keith rubbed his temples so hard he left red marks on his forehead. I mean, according to him, she was in the Neverseen my entire life. That means every memory I have of her is a lie. Every single one. Della wrapped an arm around him. I know it's hard, Keith. Do you? Because I can't imagine any of the perfect backers being longtime traitors. The silence felt painful. Sorry, Keith mumbled. It's not your fault, she's evil. And don't try to defend her. There's no debating it anymore. I mean, don't you realize what this means? His eyes darted to Sophie. My mom was probably part of everything that went down with Jody. The words were a punch to the gut, and Sophie too, Keith could tell. Jolie's journal had mentioned a woman communicating with her when the Neverseen tried to recruit her. She'd also mentioned a woman being there the night the Neverseen tried to force her to set fire to a human nuclear power plant. Either could have been Lady Gisela or both. Do you have any theories for the vision your mom had for the future? Sophie asked. Or what this timeline is with the neutral territories? Not yet, but I'll figure it out. Do you have any fathom leads in there? He asked Della. I don't know if that's a good idea, she said. Why? What are fathom leads? Sophie asked. Tiny pearls we sometimes find in rare river oysters, Dex told her. They give you crazy dreams, but they can also help you access your long-term memories, which is exactly what I need, Kev jumped in. Please, he asked Della. He said she's been preparing me. That means there have to be clues I did pick up on. Now that I know what to look for, I can find them. Della sighed and took out a bottle filled with what looked like blue-green caviar. You can have one, she said, removing it with tiny tongs. And this is a one-time only thing. Keith popped it into his mouth and swallowed. How long do I have before it hits me? Probably about 15 minutes, Dex said. I guess that's my cue then. Keith waved goodnight and left for the boys' treehouse. Time to get some answers. 24 Neverseen. Kala and Mr. Forkle still hadn't returned by bedtime, and even their reverie bells couldn't calm Sophie's tangled dreams. Lady Gisella's wounded face kept morphing into Gettin's as he sat chained in his cell. Squall loomed over him, and he screamed in Kif's mom's voice. Then his fingernails turned to ice, and everything splattered red. She dragged herself out of bed at sunrise, hoping a walk by the river would clear her head. A soft song rustling through the forest caught her attention. She raced into the trees, chasing the sound to a small clearing where she found Kala singing with her palms pressed against one of the trunks. You're back, she said, startling Kala so much the poor gnome nearly fell over. Sorry, I'm just glad you're okay. I was worried when you weren't home last night. We only returned an hour ago, wanting to make sure we hadn't missed anything. And, Sophie pressed, Kala slumped against the tree. And we found nothing. No shielded trees, no whispers of warnings in the roots. The Black Swan is moving one of Gettin's dwarven guards to keep an eye on the area, but it's possible that will only make the Neverseen change their plan. Do you have any idea what they're up to? I don't, and that's what terrifies me. In all my 4,329 years on this planet. 4,000? Sophie interrupted. You're 4,329 years old? She knew the elves had indefinite lifespan, so it wasn't big of a stretch to know that gnomes did too, but the number was too huge to fit in her brain. I believe that's the right age, Kala agreed. Though there have been stretches where I lost count. But in all that time, I've never felt anything like the worry I felt coming from Brackendale. That's why I took such a risk to bring you and Biana to investigate. Whatever we're facing is unlike anything I've experienced. The melodies reminded me of our ancient warnings. Warnings? Sophie repeated. Songs so old we don't even know who first sang them. They warn of a great withering before an endless fall. But their history holds no record of any such occurrence. Sophie wasn't a fan of the word endless, but you believe there's a cure? Kala pressed her ear against the tree. I believe nature always finds a way, but it also does so on its own timeline. We must hope the timeline is faster than the Neverseen, or whoever is behind this plague. Sophie wanted to do more than hope. She wanted to act. There had to be missing something, some deeper meaning behind what Getten had said, or some detail in the Exilium records they'd overlooked to help them find the Sionipath. She returned to her tree house, prepared to gather her friends and come up with a plan. But they'd already gathered, all except Keith, and were waiting around the waterfall. Dex helped up a gadget that looked even crazier than his evader. I figured out how to break into the Luminaria database. It looked like he'd wired pieces of imparters together and shaped them into a pyramid with 6 long antennas sticking out of the top point. 5 were made of different metals: gold, silver, bronze, copper, and iron, and the 6th looked like a twig. I know the stick part is weird, Dex said, but I needed this thing to broadcast in all 6 technologies. The elves, ogres, trolls, goblins, and dwarves were easy to figure out, but I had no idea what to do for the gnomes. I tried solar-powered stuff, but it still seemed too techy. Then I saw some branches on the ground and thought, why not? Only Dex would decide to jab a gadget with a stick. You should have heard him squeal when it worked, Fitz said. I thought a banshee had snuck into the room. Ignore my son, Della told Dex. You deserve to be excited. Yeah, I can't believe you figured it out so fast, Biana told him. Sophie smiled. Dex is a genius. Dex's green turned supernova. He pressed the base of the gadget, making the pyramid glow green. He had to wave it around a few times, like when humans try to search for a stronger cell phone signal. But eventually a crackly hum filled the room and a fuzzy hologram appeared. Sophie squinted at the image. Is that a scroll? A super old one. The database is filled with them. I've just started going through. I was working for stuff about the Wildwood colony, but this one caught my eye because of all the smudges. He pointed to black smears covering whole paragraphs. These runes have been blacked out, which means someone is trying to keep something secret. But they must have run low on ink because at the end it's thin enough for a few words to pick through. And if I'm reading them right, it proves the ogres have something that gives them leverage with the council. It took a moment for the gravity of the revelation to hit. So, you're saying the ogres have a way to control the counselors? Sophie asked. It kind of makes sense, Fitz said quietly. Alvar's always talking about the crazy restrictions the ogres put on him when he visits Travaga, and how none of the other creatures would get away with them. Right, Dex agreed. And the really weird part is, you can see it right in the treaty. I checked. The treaties for the other species basically say, we will allow you to remain free because you will do whatever we will tell you. But the ogre treaty is like, we promise we won't use our abilities on you, or visit your cities, or ask too many questions about anything you're doing, and you're allowed to continue building weapons as long as you promise not to use them, and you can do all kinds of other dangerous things too, and we won't stop you, and if we do, you have the right to declare war. Why would the council agree to any of that? It doesn't make sense until you look at this. He twisted the gadget again, and the hologram zoomed in to part of the scroll where the ink had run thin. Sophie squinted at the runes picking through the faded ink. What does it say? You can't read it? Biana asked her. Only if it's written in the Black Swan's code. Mr. Forkel had taught her mind to translate their special cipher runes, which came in handy, until she needed to read anything in normal runes. Great plan, guys. It's hard to tell without most of the context, Dex said, but this sentence is talking about how the ogres will retain possession of something that's clearly super important, and the word they try to black out is Dracostomes. Sophie frowned. That sounds like some sort of fungus. So it doesn't trigger any memories? Dex asked. Her shoulders slumped when she shook her head. I was hoping I'd say the word and the memory would click and you'd have all the answers. All the answers. Sophie sighed. Welcome to working with a black swan. It's full of disappointments. Or maybe the black swan doesn't know either, Fitz reminded him. Well, whatever they seem to be something that Council really wants, Dex said. And I'm guessing the Neverseen allied with them, with the ogres because of them. Probably after they realized they'd never get their hands on Sylvanie and Gravel. Wouldn't that explain why the council's gotten so weird lately? Haven't their craziest decisions happened since the ogres got involved? Then suddenly Sophie was the number one enemy and they were vowing to hunt down the Black Swan instead of the Neverseen. It does explain a lot, Della agreed. Alden and I have had many conversations about how the ogres have slaughtered hundreds of goblins without punishment. They also stole the gnomes' homeland, dammed up the river, and starved the gnomes out. And even after the gnomes came to us for aid, the ancient council let the ogres keep Serenvale as part of the treaty. I thought that was because the ogres refused to leave, Fitz said, so the only way to force them out would have been war. That's true, Della agreed, and they offered the gnomes protection in the lost cities, and not because they suspected how useful the gnomes would become. I've heard stories from the ancient backers about how stunned they were the first time the gnomes shared their harvest, and it was the gnomes who volunteered to help with with other tasks. Still, the council made the trolls return Darwin mines they'd stolen, but in that case, the trolls needed our medicine. Exactly, Dex said. And these Dracostomes seem to work the opposite way. Something the council wants, or maybe something they're afraid of, that gives the ogres the upper hand. But what are they? Biana asked. What would make the council grant the ogres' demands? A question formed in Sophie's mind, one she didn't want to ask, even after all the times the council had sided against her. Do you think they have something to do with the plague? She whispered. I thought of that, Dex said, but this scroll is old. So if the ogres have had the Dracostomes all this time, why would they suddenly be like, let's use it on Wildwood? Sophie didn't have the answer. Could trying to read King Dimitar's mind have been that big of a deal? And that's all you've found about the Dracostome? She asked. So far. But there's a lot to sort through. Dex tapped his gadget, shutting down the hologram. I'll search as fast as I can, but right now I have to check each scroll one by one. I'm hoping I can make some tweaks to search by keyword or something. Please be careful, Della said. It's amazing that you've been able to gain access this quickly, but doesn't that worry you? I don't mean this is an insult. This as an insult. You're clearly a brilliant technopath, but doesn't it almost seem too easy? Dex flipped over the gadget to show her a tightly coiled wire. Don't worry. This emits a signal that erases any trace of where I've been. No one will have any idea I was there. Assuming you haven't missed the security protocol, Della reminded him. Let's all try not to underestimate the council. If these Dracostomes are a crucial secret, they'll have gone to great lengths to protect it. She's right, Sophie said, and we should be really careful who we tell about this, especially Kala. If the Dracostomes were related to the plague, they wouldn't just have proof that the ogres were behind it. They'd have proof that the council knew this could happen and never warned the gnomes. 25 Neverseen. The next few days were quiet, too quiet for Sophie's liking. The dwarf stationed in Merrow Marsh kept reporting no change, as did Seer when he'd checked in with the collective to update them on his search for Keith's mom with Lur and Media. Keith hid in his room, searching his memories, and so far, he hadn't found anything worth sharing. Even Dex didn't make any progress with his new gadget. He'd named it the Twiggler because it seemed to grow more powerful with every stick he added, but he still couldn't make it search the scrolls any faster. Mr. Forkle must have sensed everyone's angst because he kept reminding them to focus on the training. The collective was still moving forward with their plan for rescuing Prentice. She kept busy by working through thrust exercises with Fitz, which did at least seem to be helping. By the end of the week, Fitz could transmit to Sophie even when Kala had led her deep into the forest, and Sophie could feel herself needing way less concentration even when she worked alone. She barely had to strain when she called Sylvanie to check on her, and the alicorn's memories were so sharp, Sophie often had to remind herself she was still in her treehouse. Bianca made progress as well. She could hold her vanish for so long, Sophie would forget she was in the room. But Bianca couldn't figure out how to hide from Kala, and neither could Della. Kala kept explaining that she saw glints of life, which sounded a bit like pollen gathering on their skin and giving them away. But they couldn't sense those glints, so they didn't know how to block them. Bianca was determined to figure it out, though, and tried all kinds of crazy methods, most of which did nothing more than give her a headache. When they weren't improving their abilities, Della insisted they learn basic fighting skills, since self-defense was a type of violence that the elven mind could tolerate. The moves weren't all that different from human martial arts, and of course, Sophie's clumsy limbs refused to cooperate, while Fitz, Bianca, and Dex excelled. Sophie quickly grew tired of feeling sore and pathetic, and even more tired of only seeing Kif when he sulked out of his room for meals. So when Fitz, Dex, and Bianca were practicing some sort of scissor kick that would surely tear every muscle in her body, she slipped away and pounded on Kif's bedroom door. "I'm not leaving until you talk to me," she told him. When Kif finally relented, she ducked under his arm and snuck into his room. Wow, she whispered, stepping back to take in the full effect. 3 of his 4 walls had been covered floor to ceiling in scribbled on pieces of paper, like something a serial killer would do. More notes were scattered on the floor, his desk, the bed. "So, you've been busy," Sophie said carefully. Did the fathom lead make you remember all this?" Kif kicked a crumpled note under the bed. "It gave me a surge, but the rest is just me." Sophie crossed to the most cluttered wall and squinted at his messy writing. "First day of Foxfire. Where was she? Level 4 midterm gift. Reason? Why did she make them test me twice to see if I manifested as a conjurer?" Kif kicked another crumpled note that said something about the Celestial Festival. "It's a lot to search through, photographic memory." Sophie nodded. She turned to the wall that sat catty corner, where the notes seemed to be focused on his more recent memories. "Dad's missing blue pathfinder, was it her? Where did she go? When did she rig my Sensen crest? Was she one of Sophie and Dex's kidnappers? Did she hurt them? What is she preparing me for?" Sophie traced her fingers over the last note. "Can I help?" "I don't see how. It's all about what's in my memories, and lucky for you, you didn't grow up in that house." "I'm a telepath," she reminded him. "I can search your memories and project them in a memory log. Wouldn't it be nice to have the whole picture, instead of just scraps of paper?" Kif ran his hands through his hair. "I don't know." Sophie picked up a note that said, "Did she ever love me?" "Please let me help," she begged. Kif sank onto his bed. Scraps of paper fluttered to the floor, and Sophie checked the messages. "Door on level 3. Where does it go? Why so many books in her office? She never reads. Did she ever wear the necklace I gave her?" "Please," she whispered. "Working alone is so much harder. It's what I used to do, remember? Until someone forced me to include them." One side of his mouth twitched with the hint of a smile. "Sounds like that person is a genius. Probably shockingly good-looking, too." She laughed when he actually looked wounded. "Oh, please, you're a heartbreaker. You don't need me to tell you that." "Hey, I've never broken any hearts. Maybe not intentionally, but come on. When you're fit, start dating. There will be crying in the Foxfire halls. I bet there are girls crying now, wishing you guys hadn't left." "Not if they've heard how awesome my mom is. There are still just as many Kif fangirls. Trust me, everyone loves the bad boys." She expected some epic Kif dissing about her use of the word everyone. Instead, his shoulders dropped and he asked, "So, you think I'm bad?" She grabbed the note that said, "The Great Gulen Incident," and handed it to him. His half-smile returned. Point taken. She brushed more notes off the bed and sat next to him. "You haven't answered my question, by the way. Will you let me help?" Kif stared at the ceiling. "I don't know if it's a good idea." "Why not?" "Let's just say my head is not an awesome place right now." "So, I've been in Prentice's head, remember? And Vinton's. And Brand's. Great, so you think I'm the same as a bunch of psychos." "I never said that. And Prentice isn't psycho." "Close enough. For right now." Sophie hated that he was right. "All I meant was that nothing could shock me." I seriously doubt that. I don't. I've also been in Alden's mind after it shattered, remember? Shoot, I've been in Ogre's mind. Though that was surprisingly soft and calm. But still, an ogre brain. And I've been in Lady Galvin's head too, when I stole the alchemy midterm questions. I forgot about that. Who knew you were such a rebel? I have my moments. He almost looked proud. But now you're used to spending your days trading secrets with Captain Perfect, and I guarantee you, my mind is nothing like his. Who said it should be? And Fitz isn't perfect, by the way. He's close enough. He moved to the one wall in his room not covered in paper scraps. I hate watching it, he whispered. Them and Della. It's all so happy and easy. Sophie moved to his side. I didn't look at her as he added. I used to wish I was a Vacker. I'd be over at their house, dreading the moment I had to go home. But nope, I'm a Sensen, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. No words existed to make anything better, so she reached for his hand. On the wall in front of them was a particularly small note with only 3 words. Who am I? Easy question, she said, taking it down. You're Keith Sensen, Master Mischief Maker, tormentor of principals, frequenter of detention, and one of the best guys I know. He raised one eyebrow as he turned to study her. I'm not the best? It's a 3-way tie. And you're also always there when your friends need you. So how about you let one of us be there for you for a change? I looked away again. You really think you can handle it? Psh, I can handle anything. She usually didn't feel comfortable making such bold, confident statements, but for once it actually felt right. Please, don't keep doing this alone. Kif sighed. Okay, but remember, you promised you wouldn't hate me. I did, and that's one promise I'll have no problem keeping. We'll see. He looked like he wanted to say something else. Instead, he turned away. So, do you want to get started now? She asked. Not really. He rubbed his eyes, and the dark circles seemed to sink deeper into his skin. I've been up all night the last few days, and the one time I did sleep was with the phantom lid. Dex was right about the dreams. He tangled his arms around himself and shuddered. But I don't know if I can fall asleep. Well, you're never going to relax in this hive of crazy. She grabbed a handful of notes and pulled them off the nearest wall. Don't! I'm just getting them out of sight so we can organize them. This was you working alone. Now you have me. I do. Sophie couldn't tell if that was a statement or a question. Try to rest, she told him. I'll be out of here as soon as I'm done cleaning up. Kif opened his mouth to argue, but the words were swallowed by a yawn. He crawled into bed and buried his face in his pillow. Sophie resisted the urge to tease him about drooling. It took her longer than she'd expected to de-serial killer his room, but by the time she'd pulled down the last note, Kiv's breathing had slowed. She listened to the rhythmic sound as she stacked the tattered pages together, wishing she could clear away his worries as easily as she could clear away the scraps. Sweet dreams, she whispered as she turned to leave. You deserve them. Kif didn't move and his breathing stayed steady, but when she turned off the lights, she could have sworn his lips were smiling. How troubled is he? Mr. Forkel asked, giving Sophie a minor heart attack as she entered the boys' main room. He stood by the fire pit, his eyes reflecting the flickering flames. Mr. Sensen, he clarified. How concerned should we be? What do you mean by concerned? Sophie asked. You did see the state of his room just now, yes? Sophie looked away. I took down all the notes, so hopefully that'll let him sleep. And he agreed to let me search his memories and record them. Mr. Forkel traced his fingers along his chin. Do you think we're going to find a clue about the Neverseen in his memories? She asked. The words so quiet she could barely hear them. It seems likely. No one keeps up a pretense perfectly. In fact, I've made several slips I'm stunned you didn't catch. Like what? Sophie asked. A smile was all he gave her. I'm also inclined to believe Gedden wasn't exaggerating about the Neverseen having plans for Mr. Sensen. He's a very talented boy. But as for whether we'll find clues, well, searching an entire lifetime is a daunting task. Either way, I'm counting on you to keep me informed of anything concerning, and by concerning, I mean anything relating to our fatal flaw. You've likely heard of the concept in your human studies. Elves all bear the same one. arrogance? Sophie guessed. I'll pretend you didn't look at me as you said that, and that is a vice. Our fatal flaw is guilt. We all react to it in different ways. In Mr. Senson's case, it appears to have set him on a quest for understanding. Such quests often end at a crossroads, and should that be the case, I cannot say which path Mr. Senson will choose. You realize that makes zero sense, right? He shrugged. Let us hope it remains that way. But keep your eyes open to warning signs and be sure to get some rest. Tomorrow will be very complicated.